Hi. In this video, we're going to talk about Cronos and the paradox of fatherhood. Fatherhood is really complex, and it's not just one thing. It can't be reduced to any one role, function, or identity. It's multifaceted, and it's filled with tensions and challenges that we're constantly unpacking in our own individual way. While in the modern era, we like to reduce things to bullet points or steps to follow, when we look back in our past, we find that stories or myths are ways that we capture a lived experience such that it has a little bit of flexibility, nuance, and we amplify what's inside of us. Instead of minimizing something down to just some base facts, instead it captures more of the numinous experience, that larger than life kind of spiritual aspect of things. And so I want to talk a little bit about the myth of Cronos as a way to revisit some of this timeless wisdom about fatherhood. Because as Kierkegaard suggested, myths are when the truth that is experienced internally is presented outside as if it's external, as if it's real. Because it is. What we experience inside is a reflection of outside, and outside reflects the inside. And it's this parallel process of these two seemingly separate, interconnected worlds. And as we visit the story of Cronos, we're going to see some of those internal experiences expressed externally through power, fear, control, growth, and ultimately transformation. And in doing so, I hope it invites us in to an evolving story of fatherhood. But before we get to that point, we have to revisit this myth. I want to retell it so that we have a similar kind of common ground to stand upon. The story of Cronos comes from Greek mythology, and so it situates that within a Western cultural tradition. I appreciate that there are other stories in other cultural traditions that say something similar about the experience of fathers. I'm going to focus on Cronos because we see him across his lifespan. But he is not the original father. The original father is Uranus, the sky. And Uranus' wife and the mother of his children is Gaia, the earth. I want to hold that for just a second because we've got Uranus, the sky, like an idea, like speech, like spirit. And then we have Gaia, which is the earth, which gives birth and sustains. It's an actual place. And we take that forward and we think, gosh, Uranus, the patriarch, the idea, right? That is what fatherland stands for. Fatherland is an idea. It is nationhood. Whereas motherland is a place. When you go back to the motherland, you're going back to a physical place that sustains you. And this might seem kind of far afield, but we can hear how this starts to narrate. It starts to connect to something internally. Who am I as a father? What do fathers do? They inspire. They bring perspective, they bring spirit, they bring something that's beyond a place, but an idea that transcends. We see how this starts to connect with analytical work, where fathers are often early representations of the external world to a child who is maybe connected through care, nurturance, and sustenance to their mother. So they had their children, the Titans. And Uranus was terrified that these Titans would take over. They would consume him, right? The father who's scared that he will be consumed by his children, that they will take over his life. And so he gives them up. He says, I'm not going to deal with this, and he casts them out into Tartarus. And Tartarus is essentially the womb of the earth. It is a place in the earth. He casts them out. He's like, look, just go spend time with your mother. I don't want to deal with you. And in doing so, he's keeping them one-sided, and he himself is staying one-sided. He wants to stay in this rigid control, and he wants his children to be as far away as possible, and in doing so, are going to become one-sided because all they do is stay in that earthen space, that mother space. Now, the details of the story aside, Cronos comes of age. He's the youngest of the Titans, and he then overthrows his father. He seizes power, and now he is the king of the gods. And in that way, Uranus became the old king, and every old king needs to be overthrown by the young king, and Cronos became the new young king. May we all grow into being an old king, and may all of our children overthrow us, and in doing so asserting their own identity. Cronos, for his part, then had children. Good for him. He became a father. And just like his father before him, he was scared of being overthrown by his children. And instead of rejecting like his father did, he did the exact opposite. And he said, I'm just going to swallow you up. He swallowed up his children, and he kept them inside of himself. So this is kind of like the father who says, look, you're going to join the family business. You're going to follow me around. You're going to learn from me. You're going to do everything that I want you to do. And in doing so, I'll never be overthrown by you. You will become an extension of me. However, Cronos' wife / sister, Rhea, protects their youngest son, Zeus, who eventually comes back, and just like Cronos did to Uranus, Zeus now overthrows his father. All hail the new king. And thus then enters a new era and all sorts of new stories emerge. But we're focused here on Cronos because we see Cronos across the lifespan, and that Cronos doesn't die. Zeus doesn't kill him, but instead he shifts, he transitions and expands into a new role. Because this Cronos is not the Cronos who is the god of time. This is the Cronos who is the god of agrarian work. And he eventually becomes a ruler of a peaceful agrarian kingdom. And in doing so, symbolizes this balance between the regulated, controlled aspect of running a government, mixed with the uncontrollable, gestational, organic world of the agrarian life. And in that way, we see Cronos ultimately achieving some sort of transcendent balance, some sort of merging of these two challenging forces that are present within fatherhood. And in doing so, he creates something that is uniquely him, his own unique path of fatherhood. And each of us are working to do that as fathers. Each of us need to forge our own path. And so we're talking about this Cronos myth as a way to start to amplify, to turn up the volume on these experiences. And we can see that Cronos and his father get pulled in these extreme directions. And while they seem opposite directions, they're actually a similar underlying theme. For Uranus, there's rejection and abandonment of his children. He is afraid that they will overtake his life, that he will suffocate by this, so he pushes them away and pushes them towards their mother. This creates an imbalance in his children because he has cast them into the earth, this organic gestational space that lacks some of the structure and routine of the patriarchal world. It's also an imbalance in himself because the sky, the spirit, means nothing without that connection to the earth, that point where it becomes grounded and we find balance. For Cronos' part, he in turn tries to control and possess his children. Seeking to protect his power, he then draws his children closer, brings them into that world of the patriarchal, that structure, that form that's modeled after his own identity. It's some powerful symbolic imagery to swallow your children, thereby they will never grow beyond you. They will always be contained by you. And this also creates an imbalance or one-sidedness in his children, that they're trapped within his authority. His containing structure and rigidity constrains their identity. This means that they're going to be out of contact with those inner kind of gestational, organic forces. And while Cronos initially embraces this one-sided kind of controlling perspective, we over time see him expand to bring both into play in his own unique way. And there are several conflicts that play out in this myth that reflect the challenges of fatherhood. The first is that tension between these polarizing forces of the organizing or patriarchal and the organic or the matriarchal. And this isn't just about men and women or mothers and fathers, but it does start to point to some of those aspects of the father experience. The psychological perspective of the patriarchal or organizing is really creating order out of chaos. There is nothing predisposed in this environment that suggests we should put it in a box, but we put it in a box. We put time in a box. We create timelines in order of operations. We create structure where there was no structure. And while we use that word structure pretty loosely, we're essentially creating these constructs. These ideas then shape our reality. These are ideas. These are Uranus. It is the spirit. It is the air. It is just an idea. And in contrast, we experience the psychological perspective of the matriarchal or the organic, where there's a natural flow or order to things. Things occur naturally. We don't force them. We don't force a plant to grow out of the seed. Instead, it just emerges. And we can't have a timeline for that. We can't try to structure that. It just is. And that's Gaia. Gaia just is. The earth is. And you can see how they start to come into tension with one another. There is that which just exists, its natural organic state. And then there is this part that wants to create structure around it, that creates some sense of order. And parenthood introduces us to both forces. We're thrust into conflict or tension between them. Babies and young children don't care about our schedules. They don't care about the ways that we've structured this chaos and made it into order. Instead, they have their own organic rhythms that are perfectly fine and perfect for where they are developmentally. And it can be a challenge for us as parents that we are called to provide that structure of the patriarchal, but also honor that each child is going to grow and develop in their own way. They're going to eat when they want to eat, and they're going to completely reject anything we try to feed them if they don't want it at that time. The challenge is finding that balance or that transcendence of this tension. Cronos models this for us by becoming the king of an agrarian society. In this way, we cultivate the land, but we can't force plants to grow. We build fences, but we allow space for the grazing to happen therein. And in fatherhood, we can't reject one side or the other. It needs to be an embracing of this paradox. Safety without suffocation, freedom without neglect. And as fathers, we're tasked with this challenge ourselves, to find these ways forward that reflect our identity and the ways that we're going to show up as fathers. Another conflict that's present within this Cronos myth is the reactive parenting versus intentional parenting. Cronos parented in reaction to his childhood trauma. His father rejected him, and so he went the other direction. He said, I'm going to bring my kids in. And many of us as fathers do the same thing, either repeating or overcorrecting the parenting that we received as kids. And that describes a reactive parenting style. Even if we're trying to mimic what our fathers did, we're still just reacting to them. What we're proposing here is this intentional fatherhood, to be aware of this pattern. Cronos makes us aware of it. And we have something that he doesn't. We have him as a model. And we can see that trauma that he experiences and how he reacts to it. And so we can do our own work. In processing our own trauma, we move from reactive fathering to intentional fathering. As fathers, we face these challenges, and they aren't new challenges. They're ones that have transcended human history. It invites us into a deeper experience, knowing that fathers have struggled with this generation after generation across the world. That as fathers, we need to live in this paradox, the tension that exists therein. That it's through that tension that we find a new way forward, and that there is no one right way to do that. What the king of an agrarian society looks like is going to be unique to each of us. And the way that we show up intentionally as fathers is going to be unique to each of us, because we're each responding to and processing through our own experiences and then bringing our own identity into the work. And in that way, the story or the myth of Cronos is not something that's static and stuck in the past. It's something that's evolving and reflects our unique lived experiences today. But all of that does require us to be open to it, to think about how these old stories reflect modern challenges, to be open to changing our perspective, to growing and expanding with it. I wish you well as you explore how this fits in your life. Thanks.